Hi everyone, welcome to another little hints and tips video. It was something that came up in the group on Facebook, and it was regarding which water-soluble pencil is going to give us the smoothest, best white. So I decided just to pull out my four main what are considered water-soluble pencils, and I thought we'd try them out. So I've got, from the top, I've got my Albrecht white. I've got the Derwent Drawing Chinese white, I've got the Derwent Inktense Antique white, and I've got the Museum Aquarelle white. So let's give them a go. So we're going to put down, we want to see, well, I'm using anthracite pastel mat, which is the darkest of the pastel mats, and what we're going to do is put these down and just write them down as well. I'm going to put these down over here. So we're going to use the Albrecht Dürer, then we're going to use the Derwent Drawing, and then we will use our Derwent Inktense and our Museum Aquarelles from Caran d'Ache. I have my suspicions on this before we even do this as to what the results will be, but let's just try it and see. So let me just zoom in a little bit more. Okay. Alright, so our Albrecht Dürer first of all. What I want to do is get down as much pigment as possible. So I'm not using a huge pressure, but what I'm going to do is just come up over the area several times. I'm also just going to rotate my application as well, so that we're getting good even coverage. Just turning my pencil as I go as well. That just helps keep a nice point. Sorry, just gone off screen there. Okay, so I feel like I'm trying to get as much pigment down on there as possible. Because the one thing, problem with white, as soon as you add water to it, and then it dries, it just goes so pale. But I'm going to try something else with this as well. So Derwent Drawing next. That's my Inktense, grab my drawing. Okay. The thing with the Inktense, the drawing, it's got such a thick nib when you compare it to how fine the aquarelle is. It's a real wide core on the pencil. Spin this around. So like I say, I just want to try and get a nice even coverage. And then we'll add water and we'll see which one gives the smoothest effect on this dark pastel matte paper. So it's roughly the same amount of pigment I'm putting down, but you can already see, if I just zoom in, how much better coverage the Derwent Drawing has given. It's a much thicker, more opaque pencil. So I'm just going to go ahead now and do the same with the Inktense. I'm just going to speed up whilst I do that for you. Okay, so here I have 4 pigments down. So I'm going to start, literally, I've got a water brush here, and I'm just squeezing some water out onto my tissue just to clean off. So what I want to do is go in and loading my nib up, so that nib is full of water. And all we want to do, remember, when we add water to watercolour pencils is we're just dissolving the water-soluble binder. So I'm going to try and do this as smoothly as possible and just literally come in with enough water to dissolve that binder without moving the paint, the pigment around too much. Try and leave as much down there as possible. Okay, so I'll come across next to, I'm going to clean my brush out, so I'm just cleaning my brush out there. Let's come across to the drawing. Okay, so not quite the same as with some of the other drawing pencils. I'm not getting much solubility there at all. In fact, I'd say I'm probably not getting anything, so there is definitely a difference between... Oh, there is some. It has a little bit, but not a huge amount. So let's come over to the ink tints. Okay, and finally to our museum aquarelles. Oh, that's lovely. Okay, so the result has surprised me a little bit. I love doing these things. So that museum aquarelle has given a beautiful, beautiful, thick, opaque, consistent application there. So I'm going to zoom in just so you can see. I'm going to lift away my magnets and then lift this up. So this is it damp still at the moment. And you should be able to see the difference. That museum aquarelle on the right hand side there. I thought the ink tints was going to be my brightest, but museum aquarelle has come up just untouchable with that little experiment there. Let me zoom out. Now I'm going to try one other thing before it's dry. I need to let it just dry a tiny little bit. And what we'll do is, if you come in whilst these areas are damp still, you can usually wiggle your pigment, wiggle your pencil. You want a nice thick edge as well. You want a nice blunt pencil or a wide edge, so you've got the maximum amount of pigment surface area touching the dampness, and you end up, it dissolves that binder whilst it's still in the pencil and it releases pure pigment down. So I'm just going to try that in a second. I just need to let it dry a tiny little bit. Okay, I'm going to zoom in again so you can see me doing this. Let's go in as far as we can. I'm only going to do half of the sheet, and what I'm going to literally, I just want to spin it as well so you can see. So this right hand side, I'm going to go in whilst it's damp. Now it's a little bit too wet still. Can you see it scratching the surface there? So what it's actually doing is cutting through the pigment. We need it to be just damp, and then what will happen is it will start to release pure pigment down here. So I'm just wiggling it. Just feeling like it's a tiny bit too damp still at the moment. It's got to be just right. Otherwise, like I say, all it does is cut through the pigment. It's getting there. It's quite cool in here today, so things aren't drying that fast. But this is a way of, if you add watercolour pencils, and especially your whites, they can go quite, what I say, wishy-washy, faded out, really translucent. As soon as you add water, they almost vanish. So you need to kind of overcompensate by putting in more pigment in that area to start with. So this is releasing really nicely down here, so I'm just keeping my strokes next to each other, trying not to create any texture, and all I want it to do is just release that pure pigment. And you can do that a couple of times. Basically, as long as it is damp, it will allow you to go in and do this. But you just don't want it too wet. A nice, even pressure. And that will just help fill that in a little bit more. So let's try I'm surprised that the Derwent Drawing, like I say, they are wax based, but they are water soluble. But this is not. If I pull it out over the damp areas, you can see it is dissolving there nicely, but adding the water to it didn't really move it at all. But coming in here now, this is allowing me to gently fill some of that in. Not great though, it's smoothed it out a little bit. Okay, so next we'll come down to our ink tints. So I'm just wiggling it until, see, that is still lifting off the pencil. So we're lifting off the pigment. Try and use the side of the, try to use a blunt edge, because as you see, if you go in there with a point, it literally just cuts through. So this isn't releasing quite as much as I'd hoped. Keep going over the area. I'm really light touch. See, I'm holding the pencil quite a way up. So I'm just letting the pencil touch the dampness. And that should be enough for it to release the pigment. It's given a nice smoothness. But I wouldn't say that it's building up any more richness in the white. Tiny bit, but nothing compared to what I think we'll get with our next one, which is already beautiful and rich, bright white and opaque. I honestly thought the ink tints was going to come up much brighter and the Museum Aquarelle would be coming in second place with this. This. Keep your strokes lovely and smooth and even. This is drying out just a little touch. I can feel the pigment just resisting. So I haven't got as much release down on this bottom one as I did on the top, but it's pretty conclusive to me. From those results, let me just zoom back out. So we've got our Albrecht Dürer at the top, and you can see, I will let these dry and then put them back up again on the screen for you, because they will lighten a little bit as they dry. But you can see this one's starting to dry here already. It will start to go, that's the wishy-washy as it starts to fade out. But as we've added more pigment on the right-hand side, and of course remember when it's totally dry, you can go back in and add more layers when it's dry as well. But this is just to see, after adding water and then going back in whilst it's still damp, which one gives us that brightest, whitest, smoothest opaqueness. The Derwent Drawing has worked much better after we've gone in with that second application whilst it's been damp. The ink tints is kind of fading out pretty much to match the wishy-washiness of that Albrecht Dürer, which has, yeah, surprised me. But again, you can put dry layers on it. But look at the Museum Aquarelle. It's beautiful, consistent, even, pure, bright white. And even this side is, I'd say the Derwent Drawing's kind of come close now with the second application, but this is the winner overall for that consistency, smoothness, opaqueness, whiteness. So I will pop up a picture at the end, let it dry, and then we will see. So we're coming back to these little tests dry. Zoom in on them now, and you can see yourself just how well they have dried out. So Albrecht, the left hand side, remember, is where, let me just draw a line down there and then we can see it a little bit more clearly. It's not exact, but I'll just give you a better idea. So the left hand side is pretty much where we've only added water. So it's the watercolour pencil with water, and then the right hand side is where we went in again with our pencils on the damp surface and just wiggled and wiggled to release more pigment. So left hand side just water added, right hand side with the extra pigment having gone down, same with the Inktense and the Museum Aquarelle. So the best out of those is the Museum Aquarelle by Caran d'Ache. It's a no-brainer, followed by the Albrecht. The Derwent Drawing is quite thick, it's just a little bit grainy there still. The one I was most disappointed in was the Inktense. I thought that was going to come out so much better. So the last thing I'm going to do is exactly what we did at the beginning. So I'm just going to come in, and all I'm going to do is, let me just draw another line. I don't want to drag any pigment across, that's the only thing. So I'm going to do another line just down through there, so to make sure I don't catch any of that pigment. And I'm just going to come in, do what we did right back at the beginning by laying just a few more layers of pigment down. So we're going to do the same thing again. I'm just going to spin it a little bit. Not a huge amount more coming down, to be fair. We seem to have saturated it pretty well. Yeah, there's not a huge amount going down on there. But you can see it's nice. It's pretty smooth. The one thing you can do, and if you can see it catching in the light at all, I'll zoom in on the later. You can now see basically to the naked eye that I've gone in there and laid down more pigment because it's got a shine to it, whereas the actual base pigment where I've added water is quite dull. So let me just do exactly the same now with my Derwent Drawing, my Inktense, and my Museum Aquarelle. So again, not a huge amount of pigment gone back down there. It has smoothed it out a little bit though. Yeah, it's filled it quite nicely there. So our Inktense, let's just hope it does something a little bit more, this Inktense. As soon as I lay that down, I can see a sheen from the binders. And I know this is antique white rather than being claimed as being a bright white, so I expect it to be a little duller than say the Museum Aquarelle, but for me it's just not giving as great a coverage. Just a bit of a shame. So lastly, not as though it needs it, I'll just come in over the Museum Aquarelle. And all it's doing really is just adding more pigment. Okay, so let's zoom in. Have a look at the results a little bit closer. So my recommendation, if you want something that's going to give you a super smoothed out white or paleness on a dark paper like the anthracite pastel mat, I'd go for your museum aquarelle, hands down. Even just after adding water, it looked great. That's definitely the most opaque. I mean, normally you'd be mixing some colour or something. You don't normally use bright white unless it's something that's more of an abstract. Now the Derwent Drawing has come up quite nicely now that I've added a dry layer over the top. But I think for sinking into the grain, obviously the Albrecht Dürer has sunk down nicer when you've added water. It's given a nice smoothish surface, but nothing quite compares to that museum aquarelle. Then the Derwent Drawing is given, with an extra dry layer, a nice thick layer there. And let's say the Inktense are the ones that are not quite as bright. So if you want quite a softer look, go for the Inktense Antique White. So I hope that has helped a little bit there. Please do join me again for another hints and tips video. And if you've got anything that you want me to demonstrate, obviously please do just give me a shout. Okay, if you've learnt anything and you enjoyed this little tutorial, please do just hit the subscribe button down in the right hand corner. It really does help my channel. Thank you very much for watching, and I will speak to you all again very soon.